All right, welcome back to another tutorial for the batch program. In this one, we're going to be going through one of the experimental functions, the rename function. This one you'll probably find the most handy, but also the most frustrating to work around because there's a lot going on when you rename a part. You can do this through the Vault program that Autodesk offers, but I find that one really cumbersome, and I didn't really like it, so I kind of made my own here. You can try it out and see what you like. With this one, obviously, for all our experimental functions, make sure you have it enabled in your settings. Secondly, in this rename parts here, you've got an option to choose a specific purchase parts folder. So any folder you designate here is going to tell the program that if I find a part that's in this folder, I'm going to assume it's a purchase part or a content center part or that kind of thing, just so that it is able to differentiate any custom parts as opposed to content center parts. So here we have our test assembly. This is just a bunch of random pieces I've put together. It's got everything. It's got weldments and derived parts and assemblies and content center parts. So it's a good test piece to run this with. So all we're doing is renaming a few of these parts, and you can kind of see how it works. So show you. We'll go through the assembly. Load all our parts. We rename parts. We only do one at a time right now. So if you have multiple parts assembled, just only click one of them. When you click rename, you may get an error regarding a script. That script is what the batch program needs to create these thumbnail files. It will create the script automatically in your VBA editor up here. And so you just need to remember to save your default VBA or IVB or whatever file that is. It'll give you a warning and let you know that's what's going on if you ever do find that. But here we have our basic structure of what we had in our right window here. This just gives our drawing names associated if we do have any drawing names with these files. Gray ones are content center parts, so we can choose to include or not include them. And then again, a purchase parts folder if it finds it in that specific folder. And then derived parts, just include them on batch. Also, we can choose to reuse parts by clicking up here. These you can deselect manually. Obviously, these ones here, they're going to be in their own category. But in my case, we'll take these 05 and 06. I'll just rename them. Actually, let me show you something. If you do rename them, say 1006, you'll notice it comes red because it sees that there's another part it's going to conflict with because they have the same location. And so if we wind up changing the other part, 5, it resolves it because it realizes that they aren't going to conflict once it's all said and done. So if you're seeing your red ones, just recognize that it's finding a conflict somewhere else. It's not necessarily in the part itself. It may be somewhere else. So that'll be the new name. It'll rename this part, whatever you call it. It'll also assign a new drawing with that part number, which is always kind of handy. I suggest reusing parts you're not going to rename, just because that way it saves the program from having to create the file and copy it over if it's not going to be a new file name, then just less brain power to be used. So before we go, I'm going to say maintain file locations. So what this is going to do, it's going to find every single part and put it in the exact same spot. And so if you have the same name, it's going to overwrite the old file. If you have a new name, it'll keep the old file names, but that's just the simplest so you don't lose anything. If you want to, you can maintain the folder structure and move the entire, like say you want to make an entire copy of this and move to different locations, kind of like a, what do they call it, pack and go without the zip. So that'll maintain all the structures. So if you have, in our case, the folder structure looks kind of like this, where I've got test assembly, and I've got the assemblies in their own folder with their drawings, and I've got the parts in their own folder with their drawings. So that way it keeps that organized. Whereas if you don't have that clicked, it'll just pile it all into the same folder, and everything will be all jumbled together. So I'm going to use maintain file locations just so that I don't have to go looking for anything. Once that's said and done, there's really nothing else to do besides rename. If you have a lot of files you want to rename, you can export them to Excel, and this simply takes these files, throws them to Excel spreadsheets so that you can rename them and do your click and drag. So for example, if I had dash 01, you can just do that and drag your numbers down, which just makes it a little bit easier. That's basically all that's for. Once you're done, you can click finished. And then obviously import from Excel will bring those files in rather than having to go through one by one. That's the only reason that's there. Large sums, if you want to see what those parts look like, that's pretty self-explanatory. So let's see what happens when we rename the sucker. If in this case I've got maintain file locations, so it realizes that some files may be overwritten and allows to make a backup. A backup will take every single one of these files that are in here and just put them into a zip into the location of the main assembly. So right now it's read this as the top assembly. That location is where your backup is going to be. It will be called, in this case, 10.4.01 backup.zip, I believe. We'll say sure. And now it's going to go through, rename them. It'll put them into a temporary drive. And once it has reassociated all the drawings and parts, then it will move them into the final location which you have chosen. There we go, operation completed. So if you go back into this assembly, we now have our 05 and 06 have now been reversed. And if we go to our file structure, you'll notice that these parts are indeed different. 10.14 is when I last made them. That's just recently. As I said, the assembly, this is where the main assembly is found, and there's our backup. So if anything does go wrong or you didn't like what you did, you can just open that backup and replace. These are the original files. So in this case, 05 and 06 are going to be the opposites of what I just renamed. So you can just drag those back into these folders and reassociate, just so that you don't have too big a headache in the end. So like I said, in this case, I renamed them in the same spot. You can put them into any location you choose. But I've found that to be fairly handy so that I can create an entire assembly and give it whatever part names I want. And then in the end, I'll just rename them parts 1, 2, 3, and keeps everything nice and neat. So hope you find that handy. Let me know if you have issues, and hope to see you again. Take care.